It's actually, my opponent was saying that criminal defense work in all sort of ways the cleanest work. You're paid by the government. It's not about money. Commercial lawyers are rude to each other. Criminal lawyers are not.
Live now, sorry. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, John. That digression by the very beginning.
No.
The entire commercial lawyer fraternity. Yeah.
This is tomorrow tonight, but to allow David get his 12 hours sleep, we have it on mornings.
Well, I mean, I had a very tricky week-long Crown Court trial last week, very stressful. So
you had a good result.
Did, in fact, get close to 8 to 10 hours last night. Yeah.
But you won the case.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Obviously, for confidentiality reasons, not good. It was a very serious case at the optimum level. It's a serious case.
Okay, and good result.
You look at it like that, but I think after a while, what you think is the first thing is to eliminate error. As long as you are performing a proper professional service and you have made no mistake, conscious of someone's liberty and life in your hands, that is your first and major priority. Then it is out of your hands and you agonize as the jury considers things. You also, I think, are very concerned if a verdict comes out the wrong way. This was a very close call.
Right.
So even
how long was the jury out, David?
All day.
All day yesterday?
Yeah. I've had juries out for 4 days.
Right.
5 days.
Nerve-wracking stuff, is it?
Well, it is, and it is nerve-wracking, and I get nerve-wracked about it because you do develop. I mean, there are obviously certain clients you just have no empathy for, or you have difficulty conjuring empathy for them.
Yeah.
Why would you? But I have quite a degree of empathy for this punter for a whole variety of reasons, which I won't go into. And so one also hopes that someone can turn their life around after this. I mean, I think that's part of the consideration process. And of course, one does get, if it is a clearly wrong conviction, someone who is innocent, then you go, then you dwell on that for a long time.
Yeah. And jury trials are still going ahead in England.
It's sporadically. It is
important cases, David.
Yeah, a prioritization in certain cases subject to resource constraints and safety-driven considerations, plexiglass, cleansing the courtroom every time someone else comes in and out.
Do you have to wear a mask?
You have to wear a mask in the courtroom if you are not speaking now. That's the rule in some courts. Certainly in the corridor, you have to wear a mask, and in the roping room, and they have elements of the court staff always kind of doing spot checks, even in the roping room. I mean, there is no doubt that, there are obvious reasons for this, but that even though Britain's liberalised and allowed people to go back to work and everything's open since Monday, there has been a huge alteration in measures of control, regulation of behaviour, and indeed self-imposed control in terms of people's behavioural patterns. I mean, it's become a very risky universe.
Yeah, and how long was that trial then?
That was a week.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a long trial.
Yeah. But I'm a great believer also, of course, that I try and filter out all the distractions in the context of that. It's, I think, a very important aspect of high functionality that one doesn't multitask. I'm really anti-multitasking.
You are, yeah.
You should be concentrating on one thing at a time and blotting everything else out. Now, it can be dangerous in terms of the amount of income people generate to sustain themselves in this neoliberal universe requires as many tasks as possible. But in a professional context, particularly in a criminal trial context, yes, you may have other things to do. They can be parked till the weekend or whatever. But you don't short service, or you don't not focus if you're in a very serious criminal trial on that task in hand. It has to be. Now, you try and blot it out in the evening, obviously, unless there's something specific to be done. There was quite a bit of paperwork to be done in this trial, technical stuff.
Yeah.
and submissions. But multitasking in professional terms is a recipe for disaster.
Well, I'm literally multitasking as we speak. So
Yeah,
let me just go straight to the papers then,
yeah,
David. You have a column also this week that I will discuss in a bit
yeah. Okay.
on the site. Yeah. Can you see that?
I see luxury coupe cars. I take it you don't want me to talk about that.
No. Here we are.
Okay. Well,
Can you see that?
yeah, the Irish Daily Mail, take the jab, don't gamble with life. Doctors start warning in the face of patients' fears prompted by AstraZeneca confusion. Well, it's not AstraZeneca confusion. It is that the AstraZeneca has caused blood clots. The Norwegians and other countries have banned it. It was quick to the market. It doesn't have quite the same level of effectiveness. As the statistics come in, more and more countries are very reluctant to use it, yet it seems to be the vaccine that's most readily on offer, and it was also the cheapest to purchase. So that is a rather skewed headline.
Yeah, and which is your vax? What vax will you get, David?
Well, I mean, there's the AstraZeneca, but then there is
Okay,
also the Pfizer, which seems to be much more effective and causes less damage, at least as far as the first dose is concerned. There are lots of reservations about the second dose of it.
Yeah.
I think we need to have
Are you
a
going to take the
huge
Pfizer
discussion
one,
about not just.
Are you going to take the Pfizer one, David?
Well, I'd rather talk in neutral, objective terms.
Okay.
I think one has to have, at this stage, look at the nuance of this discussion and not sloganeering.
But will you need to take a jab for your work?
Well, the point about the matter is, if I don't, I will certainly. I can see massive levels of restrictions in terms of my ability to travel. I mean, I also believe, by the way, generally speaking, that travel is going to be a spasmodic thing in the future for people. I don't see them traveling very often, if at all. And then also there's these terribly worrying things coming in the door about the mutations, the variants now getting so out of control that the world will be permanently in a state of vaccination and vaccinations to come. And then, of course, there is the danger of both the effect of taking the vax on people and also the legitimate danger if you don't take the vax. But then if we've got variants and variants to come, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated may be a slightly unduly black and white differentiation in that you may be vaccinated against one variant, but not against the other variant. I mean, the world has become almost comic.
Yeah, it's completely unworkable.
The whole thing has become choices that people are making or being forced to make or have options to make, which may or may not protect, may or may not conclusively protect. And we're shooting in the dark with unknown chances and probabilities. This has become a truly random universe.
Okay. The Irish Examiner, mortgage hikes fears spark calls for state to act. Expert warn exit of KBC. This is KBC Bank left yesterday.
Well, yeah, and also didn't Ulster Bank leave recently as well. And Danske Bank, and I did that case 7 years ago in Dublin, they also left just after I did the case. So I got some very odd calls from journalists in Denmark in the context of the case.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's happened is they've liquidated the country through their variable interest, reneging on promises. They factored all of their assets to vulture funds, and they've reneged of any civic responsibility of a banking structure. But banks have lost that idea because they become investment, profit-orientated vehicles. They're not like Jimmy Stewart's "It's a Wonderful Life" any longer. They don't protect deposit holders; they protect shareholders, and they sell people products of dubious utility based on false representations and lies. And then once they've squelched everybody and people are in debt and can't repay the debt, and the courts uphold their misrepresentations in terms of things like tracker mortgages or in terms of reneging on variable interest agreements linked to ECB rates, they then just cut their losses, factored off to the vulture fund, so that they can screw the punter and leave the country.
Yeah. Tricolour at half-mast for Philip's funeral, the tricolour.
Yes, well, rightly so.
What, in Ireland?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean,
why?
Paying your respects to, I mean, there is a so-called residues of special relationship, you know?
I mean, no, I mean, if Prime Minister died in Britain, it wouldn't merit that, would it?
Well, it depends on the Prime Minister, I'd imagine. If Churchill died.
I don't think anything happened in that case. But he's the consort of the head of state.
Well, that's if you look at it in technical terms. But he you know, he's been a feature of British public life way in excess of most people's lifespans.
Yeah, but we have acknowledged all that. I mean, during the week. I mean,
well, I mean, look, I don't think one should get overtly Republican one way or the other.
No,
in the sense that I don't think it should be politicized as an issue.
That is political. Do you know? I mean, having it at half-mast is a political statement, really, isn't it? Of a sort.
No, maybe a sign of just respect. That's
Okay. I'm sure it'll upset some people. In fact,
I'd imagine it will. I wonder what the reaction will be. I mean, but of course the reaction may be more private than public in a way, because I think there are all sorts of complications arising now from what's happening in the north of Ireland.
The 23.5 million settlement for brain injuries to a profoundly disabled girl in Ireland. Were you aware of that the settlement yesterday?
No, I wasn't aware of it, but
it's a huge amount of money. But the damage caused to these people is just you couldn't put a price on it. But
was it to one person or to several people?
One family.
Right.
Yeah. So the Irish Sun, nothing really. 12.7 million check is in the Post. The Echo, again, this 23.5 million injuries award. Hang on, I just want to. Sorry. Actually, 1 second. I thought I had the. That is a big award, isn't it?
Well, it's a colossal award. I would have thought the person requires care for the rest of their life and has been rendered a paraplegic or something like that, or serious brain injuries. It's a colossal award.
I mean, and it's not.
Yeah, I take it it arises in a professional negligence context.
I think so. Well, no liability was admitted, but
well, if you're giving someone 23.7 million, I don't think you're not saying you weren't responsible, but you are protecting people, I suppose.
No, I'm just putting up the Irish Times now. Actually, if you just give me 1 second, those medical payouts though are
yeah, but it's a bit like casino, right? You get all these stories in America of the personal injury lawyer who fights for 20 years and gets a catastrophic settlement. But it often takes a lot of time, and more to the point, a lot of people get away and don't get the settlements they want. The other point in a resource-driven time, with the hospitals, massive backlogs, and the COVID occurring and reoccurring, you can see how negligence issues will be de rigueur. You also see it in the Crown Courts as well, because stop-start universe cases get dropped, brought up again. Once we're in this sort of chaotic environment, you've got to avoid it in your own case being personally sloppy, but you can see how sloppiness can become all pervasive.
Okay. Under 30s may get vaccinated early to reduce spread of COVID-19. Again,
It may, yeah, the conditional imperfect may.
Yeah.
People should be much more tuned to language.
Well,
it's a real bugbear of mine at this stage. I mean, a criminal defense lawyer must have a very sharp grasp of the nuances and tropes of language. And people could read that in a glance and not realize that it is not an affirmative commitment at all. It is only a possibility.
Can I refer to a piece that's in the Irish Times today, and it's a piece by Owen Dray, who is a researcher at the Wilfrid Martin Centre, the official think tank of the European People's Party.
Yeah.
He's talking about the hotel quarantine system this week, that was introduced.
And what does he say about it? I can read it here. We are the only country.
Let me quote from this. He says, "Far from embracing the European mainstream and reinforcing our continental policy objectives post-Brexit, Irish public policy has once again followed the British example. But this time we can't even copy Britain's measures coherently. The great irony here is that for all the Brexiteer rhetoric about taking back control, no EU member state currently appears on London's list of states requiring mandatory hotel quarantine. Once again, as with everything to do with Britain and COVID, Ireland has sidled into a terrible type of implied superiority. However, at least Westminster has maintained a much greater ability to analyse risk and protect business than Dublin could ever dream of. For the EU, the hotel quarantine fiasco is just the latest example of Ireland's increasingly isolated status in Brussels. To lack awareness of our responsibilities to our European partners is simply beyond belief."
Wasn't there a famous quote by Milton Friedman about if the Irish political class were to manage sand in the desert, all the sand would disappear, or something to that effect? Right. One should not underestimate their sheer stupidity. But of course, it's not just stupidity. It is dehumanization, treating people as cargo and cattle. It is utterly self-destructive. It is incomprehensible. It also shows a narrow isolationist nationalism, a fear of the other, of foreigners, contagious diseases brought in by people corrupted by foreigners or foreigners coming in. It is, and that is, I think, where the analogy to Brexit is there, but misplaced to some extent. Brexit may be motivated to a degree by a legitimate hatred of the EU, but you don't see as much overt racism and anti-foreigner sentiment in Britain than you do in Ireland, and you certainly don't see a mandatory quarantine. And of course, it's contrary to EU law, and I think those women were ultimately released.
Yeah, but also, David, was the visual. You've got people arriving and they're being met by soldiers, armed soldiers in camo gear, escorting them to.
But if you've looked, I've been going on about this for years. There's an unpublished article which no one will publish called "Disbanding the Gardaí," and in that article you see the Gardaí present at evictions in the north side of the city in balaclavas and paramilitary uniforms, and in parts of the countryside as well. Mm. And if people don't see, images are important. Yeah. If people don't see that their police force are SWAT squadding ordinary people in a kind of balaclava-driven way, and they don't see the equiparation and the relationship between that and the police state, well, then they're mad.
Well, this is Irish Army. I mean, this is the Defence Forces. I just want to get some of the photographs we had this week from Dublin Airport. I'm not sure what message they were trying to send out, like that we're.
Well, I think, look,
beautiful isolation, or what is it?
Well, I mean, it's almost like there's been a fascist creep in the Fine Gael authoritarian strongman mentality and elements of Fianna Fáil. And it is always a sign, actually, not of strength, but weakness when disproportionate measures in a bullying, coercive way are utilised. And the pattern of Irish governance has been to go to ultra extremes about everything. And
yeah, I asked Dan Boyle. I asked Dan Boyle this week. What's going on? What is that about?
What did he say?
How could he said that they were responding to the public clamour for this kind of thing?
Well, Edmund Burke's definition of a statesman. It is, I am a delegate, not a representative. I am not there to parrot everything my constituents tell me or to give in to populist hysteria. I am there to represent fearlessly, but with judgment and differentiation. Just because 100% or 99% of the population want to jump off the cliff, that doesn't mean you legitimize cliff jumping.
Yeah, this is the kind of image where there. I'm just sorry, 1 second. I'm multitasking.
Not at all. Well, I'm focusing on this. Hopefully.
Yeah, just I mean, these people have done nothing. they're
Jesus, this is crazy.
You know,
it's just crazy.
It's unreal. I mean, and no other EU country, and also when it happened in Queensland or whatever, there were no. It wasn't soldiers who greeted them. It was, you know, representatives of the airport.
Yes, but Queensland is the most right-wing part of Australia. It's always been hugely right-wing. And if we're being more right-wing than Queensland, well, that's not saying much at all. The other thing I dislike about this is that the sense that Ireland is communautaire is completely sabotaged by these actions, you know?
Yeah, but it's not reflective really of although they would argue that they're doing it because of the clamour for this.
Yeah, well, they could argue.
I don't think it reflects the Irish character as such. You know,
well, I don't know how. I don't know what's going. In the sense that what I do sense. Let's be clear about this. When people have lost control, they develop the most extreme measures to convince people
that they're in control,
that they are authoritative and in control.
Yeah. But they've been very badly exposed on this hotel quarantine thing. I mean,
well,
they've taken it off the, yeah.
Well, do you know what I said? There's a famous quote by Clarence Darrow at the time of the monkey trial, Scobie's trial, and he comes down to represent, and he's regarded by the South America as the great secular Satan. And one of the local townspeople says to him something to the effect, you know, why have you come, you dirty person, why have you come to this town? And Clarence Darrow, which is opposite to the quarantine as well, said, well, madam, I had a nice clean bed in Chicago and I wish I had stayed there. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, people have got to realize that they should also, I think, in a sense, realize the altered universe requires, at one level, safety, self-regulation, discipline. And unfortunately, travel is no longer, I think, something to be taken as such intrinsically for pleasure, because the risks are and also it's not just the risks of going and coming back and the control mechanisms imposed upon you. I mean, there is a real sense of worldwide closure of the walls in terms of like a worldwide Berlin Wall segregation in terms of the quality of people's existences, which was to some extent that article I wrote for Broadsheet touched on that in relation to Drew Harris and his infomercial on the Late Late Show.
Yes, the Mother and Baby Redress Scheme may, again, that word, need 1 billion.
Yes, well, where is it coming from? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's time to revisit, I think, the indemnity deal that the Fianna Fáil did with the churches in the aughts, the noughts.
Yeah, well,
they put a cap on these.
Well, it was engineered that way. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and it was done in the middle of the, you know, the kind of. I don't even think McDougall knew Rory Brady was AG. It was done very, very on not unethically. Well, I won't say unethically, but certainly an unorthodox way of doing it.
Well, certain people who are close to the church, represented in such a way to secure the deal in the way that they did.
Yeah, exactly. And
I think one doesn't really understand. People think we've become a secular country the control by extreme elements of church-affiliated people and the stranglehold that they have over academia and the professions is still a huge feature of Irish public life.
It really is, and it only comes to the fore really when the money's been mentioned. You know.
Well, I mean, I think
nothing moral, nothing ethical. You know, it's all.
Well, I think there is something in Catholicism where it ultimately is about money.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, that's what Martin Luther purged from simony and nepotism and all of that. And Ireland is a bit like Italy, an extreme basket case in that respect. And of course, there is a sense of the worthy, the very religious, of their entitlements and the judgment between them and the unworthy. I mean, you wouldn't want me to go on about this too much. I'm probably likely to slander and libel most of the Irish High and Supreme Court.
No, but I did read a Jesuit handbook once that demonstrated how you could persuade a widow to give the church her inheritance. And part of it was to, once you've got the money, is to then treat her with indifference. And that'll make her think she's not sure of herself in terms of, you know.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean,
unreal.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think everybody knows at this stage that I'm an agnostic with Christian tendencies, if that's not a contradiction in terms of both. My distaste and hatred for those sort of people and their manipulation of ordinary, decent folk in Ireland and elsewhere has reached epic proportions.
Well, this is it. Gap between doses of a vaccine to be extended. This is the Pfizer vaccine, I think. Oh, the Moderna and Pfizer.
Well, why are they extending the gaps?
I heard the Pfizer guys say that there'll need to be a third dose.
Oh,
so you know where this goes, don't you? I think once you get on it, you'll have to keep on getting.
It's like the Hotel California. You could check out, but you could never leave. Yeah. And of course, that song, which is replayed endlessly, and I don't like it very much, but and you can't avoid it in Ireland. But and it's so endemic of the culture of the north side of the city at one level in a juvenile way. But that song, which was created in the 70s, was about how Los Angeles.
What is it about the north side? Because you laid into Cork last week. Now you're
no. I mean, you just hear a lot of people, the Hotel California, that kind of, well, maybe it's the South Side. Let's be even-handed. But the point about it is, the song is about how everything turned to utter mush in Los Angeles in the 1970s, and we are in a perpetual Hotel California, a world Hotel California, with everything turning to mush.
Without the Californian weather and the
yeah, at least you've got a sunshine there. I mean, it's very funny though, in an odd sort of way. I think in this, what Arun Jata Roy calls the great pause, and I'm certainly being very, very reflective. People perhaps think I'm writing a little too much in some respects, but in terms of being very reflective, one is trying to focus on the important things in one's life. And simple pleasures, simple things are incredibly important. Light is important. Trees are important. I don't want to sound like a tree hugger, but woods, forests.
You're beginning to
these are the more important things.
Farewell, Prince Philip, the Daily Telegraph. That's a photograph. I think it's in the Scotland.
They look jolly happy, don't they?
Yeah, it's a good photograph of them, actually. They look.
There is she has the Queen's expression in her face. It's a very trustworthy looking face. I mean, barristers are inclined to judge people that way.
Yeah.
Has someone, you can look at someone and work out, this is a decent, fair person. You could just instantly regardless of the fact she's Queen of England, whereas he's a little bit more mischievous, isn't it? It's a smirk and a sneer simultaneously.
They're good. They were, I was saying last week, they were very good, physically compatible pair, weren't they?
Well, yeah, I think she probably regarded him as a little bit adds a little bit of color to her life, a bit like the relationship between Thatcher
and Dennis, as we were
and
mentioning. Masks to be jettisoned at roadmap test events. Don't know what that means. Okay, sorry. Green light for pregnant women to have COVID jab.
Well,
yeah. Okay.
We're going to get on a serious point. Elaborate. We're going to get into a very tricky legal and moral universe quite quickly about questions of consent and choice in relation to the jab. What are the implications of saying no? What are the implications of saying no endless, in the sense that if there are endless jabs, can you draw a point and say no, or I've had enough?
No, because then you're kind of a blockchain really with the.
Well, yeah, but if you buy into the blockchain, that's the point. You can check out, but you can never leave.
You're tied into it. Like,
well, yeah, but then should you go into it in the first place? Then the question becomes questions of coercing freedom of choice, so that you're forced to do it. And there's force by physical force, which I don't think in certain countries will happen. But there's force by peer pressure. But there is also force by legitimate activities you may wish to undertake, which you may no longer be able to undertake, which is the small measure of a foreign holiday or
working in court or whatever. Like you and
and so you have choices to make, and they're unenviable choices in some respects. I don't think they can force employees or workers to have it, but you never know. And I think
universities in America.
American universities are a joke. Sorry.
No, I know, David, but a number of American universities you have to get the vax jab.
Well, yeah, but the culture of social sanitization of American universities is jaw-dropping.
But there's no difference really now between LSE and Brown University. Do you know? And it's the universities worldwide are pretty much the same. You know, I mean, it's Chinese money and it's whatever. You know, they're pretty similar.
Well, I think Goethe's idea of civilized education probably died a long time ago. Yeah. Mind you, having said that, I do a class in Middlesex University, jurisprudence, philosophy of law. But it's a remote class at the moment, and universities are coping with the remote universe, which is unsatisfactory from the teaching point of view. But maybe, I mean, there's
academics are leading the push for the zero COVID strategy. Obviously there are rebellious academics, but most of the academics are 100% behind this.
Well,
their job is probably.
Define. I always draw a crisp distinction between an academic who is an academic and an academic who is a public intellectual and maybe a practitioner as well. If you're within a specialist discipline and you're an academic and you have no field or experience, you're, in my view, a fraud. Frankly, if you are an academic who isn't interdisciplinary, then you're a bog standard time server.
Okay.
And also they sing for their supper within university structures.
Okay. Growth confirms China's resilience. That sort of feeds into the COVID thing as well. But
this assumption's point, and we've mentioned it so many times. He's so right about this. This is Chinese corporate capitalism gone mad. I mean, do people not see what's coming? The small measure of freedom that Hong Kong had, the Chinese authorities went in there as an invasion force that in normal circumstances would have created world outrage ad infinitum.
If it hadn't been
but hasn't done so.
No, because COVID came along
Yes, but what is Chinese corporate capitalism? It is. You have no freedoms of rights, especially freedom of speech. Or we lock you up and turn you and murder you. You have no rights of liberty, no rights to criticize the government, criminal, penal, draconian laws. I was at a death penalty conference in Oslo, and I listened to the Chinese speaker, and it was just crazy stuff. Death penalties for embezzlement, death penalties for this, that, and the other, endless death penalties for rape, death penalties for drugs. So liberties go out the window, privacy goes out the window, speech goes out the window. You work your arse off for us, and we don't regulate pollution. We do regulate your population and the amount of children you have. And at the end of all of this, all we'll give you is a shocking degree of security. I mean, come on.
And also, it's not like everyone's in the same boat, because you've a billionaire class and a millionaire class in China, kind of untouched by communism or any of.
Well, there has always been what Digelis, the Yugoslavian communist, historically said, the new class, which is that the people in the Dakas were always there in Russia and China. The ruling elite always had the privileges of Western capitalism. If you ever read biographies of people like Mao or Chiang Kai-shek or those sort of
but these aren't kind of little holiday homes by the Black Sea.
No.
Private jets, and they live in America, but they're technically anyway.
Yeah, it is. But it's yet again the development of a kind of oligarchical, feudal capitalism, which is that a narrow band, and not just in China. Let's not just blame China. The Americans. It's a small percentile of the world's population, ever increasing, earning more and more astronomical amounts of money, growing their assets during these awful times, and everybody else hustling for a buck and a dime. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I think that's Bob Dylan's.
No, I'll claw yours. It's not you scratch my back, I'll claw yours.
Yeah.
Your column this week, you touch on a lot of things as usual.
Yes, it's had quite a reception. It was only, in a sense, an afterthought, because you had rejected some previous columns because you thought they were of historic and kind of philosophical interest rather than having. I'm not criticizing.
Well, you wrote them a few years ago. That's the problem. They were kind of. You're trying to.
Well, I've updated one of them. We'll chat about that afterwards. But this was fresh.
Then you graft on contemporary issues, which it's very.
Yeah, well, this was completely hot off.
You shoehorn them in, and
this was shoehorned completely. It's a very direct thing, and it's obviously touched a raw nerve. Yeah. I just want to say a couple of things about it, if I could. One is the title of it, The Unvaccinated, is similar to things like the dispossessed or the excluded, hence the analogies to Fritz Fanon and so on, which and the 1950 intellectual strata, which is very important because, of course, within colonial theory, people like Camus, Fritz Fanon, Camus more ambivalent in all of this as ever. Edward Said talked about the wretched of the earth, the excluded and the dispossessed. But the wretched of the earth has become the earth. That is the point. And the unvaccinated, as many of your very astute commentators pointed out, is a metaphor. It is not, but it is a metaphor that is exposing, putting a glimpse of a reality that may be coming, which is that we are dividing the world up into different sorts of categories. And if, for example, we do enter this universe of pandemics and pandemics to come, which seems inevitable at this stage, then there will be differentiations for people based on precautions, up-to-date precautions. All of this is corrosive and destruction of liberty and freedom at fundamental levels. And the picture, Henry Cartier-Bresson's picture of the great man himself, Albert Camus, he is so central to the culture. I'm almost slightly obsessed with him, and I've written several things about him. But all the values that Camus espoused, and remember, he's the youngest ever winner of the Nobel Prize, I think maybe with Kipling. And that is based on 3 brilliant but short novels. But it is also based on his tremendous political writings and engagement, and his sense of moderation and reason and balance, and his distrust of extremism and tribalism, and his understanding of how plagues can become exercises in propaganda, I mean, it's almost like clairvoyant at this stage. Everything he's written is of such relevance to our time at all sorts of different levels and very accessible to people. You could read.
I think your point was that it takes somebody from he's a kind of mixed background.
Well, yeah, he was the
outsider,
quintessential outsider because he was French but living in Algeria and doubly despised. So when he migrates to the French mainland, he is despised by the French as a kind of country bumpkin or expatriate, or in the colonies migrate there. And then in his country of Algeria, he is despised as a French colonialist with the Muslim majority. And that got him into all sorts of trouble in the Algerian War because you had the Marxist loopers, Sartre and de Beauvoir, giving out about the French colonialism exclusively, and Camus going, again, it is the ground of the middle that is so ropey. Camus going, well, look, on the one hand, I do condemn French terrorism in suppressing people. I condemn people bombs. And
broken up there.
The shrillness. I condemn people who go into marketplaces with bombs. So the shrillness with which he was attacked from the left and the right, but particularly the Marxist left, were so dogmatic. They excommunicated him. When he died, or was murdered, depending on his perspective on this, de Beauvoir famously said, I'm numb. I have no feelings towards him anymore. Well, that is ludicrous. And of course, time has told, hasn't it? He is a much greater prose writer than Sartre and de Beauvoir by 20, by 50. And over time, the over-elaborate, sub-Heideggerian intellectual ideas of Sartre are no longer as relevant, nor are the structuralist ideas which followed anything but corrosive and destructive. And this little man of reason, with his fabulous essays and his wonderful little books, looms larger and larger. But I think the point about it as well is that he senses an age of extremism, which I do as well. But what the argument is with it's not that he's a rebel. The rebel is a misnomer. It is a criticism of extremism. The concept of a rebel is independent thinking, judgment, reason, moderation, balance, appropriateness, proportionality. If Albert Camus is a rebel, so is John Consumption. I think in an age where people are screaming and being far too shrill, nuance has been lost in the culture everywhere, and choice has been lost because of nuance, and the scope for public disagreement has been lost.
Well, as one of the unvaccinated and never will be vaccinated, I'm almost accepting that there will be another class of which I'm a member of, like a lower caste. Genuinely, I mean, I feel that there's a medical.
But you're one of the more famous journalists Ireland's produced in the last 40 years. Probably one of the two most. In terms of Vincent Brand, maybe no one could regard you as a lower class.
Oh, David.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mentally, I mean, I also feel, as many would be, I'm a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearing, whatever. But with COVID, but with COVID, it really has kind of separated, people. It's very difficult to have a conversation with anybody who is for these measures, if you're against any of these measures.
I mean, look, you can structure the conversation very straightforwardly, as myself and Consumption and others do, and the Irish Council for Civil Liberties does. And initial structure of the conversation, wearing my hat as a lawyer through human rights lenses, is that there is a slippery slope, a creep towards state authoritarianism, that emergencies create that, and very soon, by executive action, executive decree, as Carl Schmitt, the great German jurist, argued, you have the developments of the. Well, but before he was a Nazi.
I know. I always have to remind our viewers.
No. I'm not quoting a Nazi. The fact that Martin Heidegger is a Nazi doesn't mean he didn't say some interesting things. And the point is that Schmidt's point is a liberal point, even though he became a Nazi and warned about it, is the creep of executive action, authoritarianism, embedded legislation, the utilization of an emergency to pass other types of legislation, counterterrorism legislation, detention centers, quarantine measures. Quarantine measures then become accepted in the public psyche. They become rolled out to different types of quarantine for different types of people. Suddenly the Article 3 rights of inhumane and degrading treatment, of privacy, of liberty of movement, all jettisoned, all go out the window. And judges put in the invidious position of, although they may have to disagree with such legislation, they have to enforce it, construing it restrictively or narrowly, but there's only so far you can go with all of that if the legislature and the executive start ratcheting it up. And so there's a legitimate conversation to be had from that perspective, regardless of what you may believe in larger terms. And in that sense, so that's the first point.
Yeah.
And questions of moderation, reason, and proportionality and choice, if anyone is being afforded one. But there's also, I suppose, the idea that if you do choose, as you say, you're going to be the unvaccinated, well, then I would have thought in the present universe that will have an enormous amount of effect on your ability. I mean, you can run this remotely, I suppose. You can go down and do your shopping. Who knows, they might allow you to swim in the beach soon, but you will not be allowed travel. You may have difficulty going to see your friends, your loved ones. You can communicate with them remotely. I mean,
it's convenient that having these views leaves you with very few friends anyway. So I mean, it's there's swings and roundabouts. Joking.
Well, I mean, I have lots of friends. Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah, and that is because
I think
I have lots of enemies as well. But some of the things I say, not everyone agrees.
I think the conspiratorial view of this is beginning to be the only one that makes sense. Do you know? I mean, otherwise, none of
it.
Well,
I'd be a little careful if I were you, John. There's a story about a German doctor and lawyer at the beginning of vaccine number one, and in a very bourgeois, hyper-educated German way, she says, "This whole vaccine stuff, totally disproportionate. These laws are ridiculous," and they locked her up and they sectioned her. Now she got out, but
yeah.
It raises a really important. Once you are critical of technocratic corporate structures, which I am, but in a modified way, your views become demonized, and within their institutional perspective, they become, it's like the way they treat whistleblowers.
Yeah.
The views become quasi-psychotic or unacceptable, or that terrible word mainstream, whatever the hell that means. I mean,
we're still out of time, but go on.
Yeah, that terrible word mainstream. So I think by virtue of views at this stage, there is a real danger that a lot of people who contribute, as you do, a huge public service to the planet will become marginalized. And
I mean, also I'm at an age, I mean, I fully accept that this is the way it's going, though. I don't have any pretense that somehow, reason will win the day.
Well, two things. Yeah, are we running out of time? Are we?
We are desperately, but go on.
Okay,
David, please.
Two brief quotes. Dylan Thomas: "The light is dying, although it looks pretty light in Barcelona. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. It is an existentialist act." Secondly, which I think almost every morning when I go to court, if I'm feeling down, Samuel Beckett: "Ever tried, never mind, ever failed, try again, fail better." I may not be reproducing it exactly, but I do think the Stoic mentality of reason, getting up in the morning, doing your job as well as you possibly can, mucking and
Completely.
muddling through, trying to be nice to people and courteous and
Well,
civilized.
I'm obligated to say, I mean, the problem is, or not the problem, it is a bit tricky. I mean, most, as I say, vast majority of our readers support the lockdown, support the restrictions, support the quarantine. In fact, a lot of them do. So I have to obviously hold my kind of personal views, and I have no intention, I have no need, I have no feeling or desire to wake anybody up or anything, or to sort of explain what's happening. I just feel in myself.
Well, I mean, look, there has been a seismic alteration in human affairs, a shift, a tectonic shift, or something like that.
But most people support them. That's what.
Well, I think there are tributaries of argument and disagreement.
There
still
are some, but the vast majority.
Civilized countries.
Yeah, but
well, I mean, I take your point about Ireland. I mean,
and Britain too, really. I mean, you're talking about a very small percentage of people who are against these measures.
No. I mean, you can talk about tailoring the measures, being against them to some extent, the extent to which they are disproportionate. These are arguments of nuance.
No, they're not. They're not. They're actual arguments of policy. I mean, they could argue, the Irish government, that the Irish public demanded this quarantine, this mandatory hotel quarantine.
Populism is not a panacea for
no, I'm not. Yeah, but it doesn't make me have more. I mean, we're still very, very much in the minority. It doesn't matter whether it's a.
Well, I think in Ireland, unlike in Britain, it is the starkness of acceptance and the passivity and compliance and support for the extent of the extreme measures we've imposed, which are going beyond the extremities of every other European.
I know, but David,
that is truly shocking.
I know, but David, nobody really knows how to resist properly. There's no right to assembly at the moment. There's no. The mainstream won't allow anybody.
Well, no, I mean, on my way back from court after that trial, there were protests in the train outside the tube station. Protests when I got to the train station. Protests.
Okay. Well,
I think there are a lot of things to be said against Britain, but it is a society of divergence, of multiculturalism, and of independent-minded people, and. We need, even though it may be futile, a few more independent voices. What seems to be so odd in Ireland, it seems to be so odd, is, and I think it must be a product of the Irish educational system in the last 15 to 20 years, the stifling of public debate, the denudation of the public sphere, the curtailment of legitimate and reasoned argument, the despising and demonization of difference, the uniformity of the discourse, such that at the moment we have boxed ourselves into a position where you almost feel there's no way out for them, there's no way out for Ireland. And we are turning ourselves into the worst form of national autarky.
Yeah.
And
well, we agree, but we probably just disagree on what's behind it. You think that this is spontaneous, kind of?
I don't think it's spontaneous.
Public health gone wrong.
It's a combination of a cock-up and people profiteering from it, and I mean, there's no doubt there's some very dark developments. I mean, the Paletto people who've done this deal with the Greeks, where they're supposed to be helping them with the COVID vaccine. And in fact, what they're doing is they're getting all the data on all the Greek citizens, is exactly what Zuboff warned about surveillance capitalism. Okay. No, Samuel Beckett. Okay. Ever try again, fail better. Keep trying.
Misquote better.